They said he came back to make peace, that he returned because he finally saw the light, finally felt the weight of the damage he caused. That maybe, just maybe, this was a man transformed by regret and shaped by the lessons life had taught him. But let's not kid ourselves. Let's not fall for the script written to seduce the public eye, because the truth is simpler, colder, and far more calculated. It was never about redemption. It was always about reputation. Think about it. When people genuinely change, they don't announce it with flashing lights and a press tour. They do the work quietly. They rebuild trust without expecting applause. They serve, they sacrifice, they show up even when no one is watching. But his return, it came with cameras, PR spin, and a carefully constructed narrative. This wasn't a soul in search of forgiveness. This was a man in pursuit of relevance. His return wasn't the climax of a redemption arc. It was the launch of a comeback campaign. Why now? Why not a year ago or 5? Because right now the timing suits him. The environment is ripe for sympathy. The public's collective memory is short, and the moment offers the perfect storm of opportunity. New markets, new money, and a media ecosystem hungry for drama, for controversy, for someone to rally behind or rail against. He knew this, his team knew this, and they played the moment like a maestro conducts a symphony. Every move, every word, every appearance was curated. Even his so-called vulnerability was packaged in a way that seemed authentic, but never too raw, never too real. Let's talk about image, because that's what this has always been about, not who he is, but how he appears. When the truth about him first came out, his world didn't just fall apart. It became a liability. Partnerships dropped him. Brands distanced themselves. His name, once celebrated, became a warning. He became a symbol not of excellence, but of excess and failure. That's the scar he really came back to heal, not the one on his conscience, but the one on his resume. Because in the worlds he walks through, be it sports, business, entertainment, politics, reputation is currency. And his had gone bankrupt, but now with this return, he's buying it back, one interview, one headline, one sympathetic gesture at a time. He's banking on our willingness to believe in second chances, and don't get it twisted. Second chances are a beautiful thing when they're earned. But this isn't about earning. It's about manipulating perception. Redemption is inward. Reputation is external. And every step he's taken has been outward, facing, designed not to heal the people he hurt, but to repair the version of himself the world sees. Look closer and you'll see the mechanics of it, the calculated leaks to the press, the sudden acts of charity, broadcast just enough to make headlines, but not enough to make a real difference. The reunion with old allies who once distanced themselves, now brought back under the promise of mutual gain. It's a strategic game of optics, not a journey of the heart. Because if this were about true remorse, he'd have come back humbly, quietly, without expecting applause or ratings or redemption on demand. And perhaps most telling of all is what he hasn't said. The apologies he hasn't made, the truths he continues to sidestep, the victims he never reached out to directly, personally, without the presence of an audience. Because those things don't serve the image. They're messy, they're inconvenient, and this entire return has been anything but inconvenient. It's been smooth, polished, tailored to a narrative, not one of accountability, but of reinvention. Because here's the thing, people don't usually come back unless they want something, not just closure. Not just forgiveness, they want access, they want power, they want a seat back at the table. And he knew that the only way to get that was to clean the surface, even if the foundation remains cracked. He doesn't need to be perfect, he just needs to be marketable again. That's what this return is about. Scrubbing the brand, repackaging the man, restoring the image so the machine that once made him can start printing again. And many will fall for it, many already have, because he's charming, because the story is seductive. Because people love a comeback more than they love consistency. But we owe it to ourselves to look beyond the story we're being sold, to remember that redemption isn't declared, it's proven, and that proof takes time, silence, humility, not stage lights and applause. So no, this isn't about healing, it's about headlines, not about growth, but gain. And the moment we start confusing the two, we become complicit in the charade. We start trading truth for spectacle, substance for storyline, but we know better now. We've seen behind the curtain, and we can choose not to be fooled, because when it's really about redemption, you don't have to say it, it shows. And so far, all we've seen is a man obsessed not with who he's become, but with how he's perceived. They'll tell you this was a story of redemption, that after everything, he finally found the strength to face the past and return a better man. They'll say he came back to make things right, to take responsibility, to own up to the damage he caused. But when you strip away the headlines, the carefully crafted statements, the staged moments of humility, what's left? The truth, plain and unpolished. It was never about redemption. It was always about reputation. Redemption, real redemption, is slow, often painful, and always selfless. It doesn't seek the spotlight, it doesn't need applause, it's a private struggle, not a public performance. If someone genuinely regrets what they've done, they don't orchestrate a return like a grand unveiling. They don't hire a PR team to reintroduce them to the world. They don't pick a moment that benefits their career or image. They do the work behind the scenes without guarantee of reward or recognition. That's what makes it genuine. That's what makes it hard, but look at how he came back. It wasn't quiet, it wasn't humble, it was timed. Measured, controlled, the cameras were rolling, the headlines were ready, the social media campaigns had their hashtags already drafted. His return wasn't a moment of reflection. It was a marketing event. This wasn't someone crawling back after falling from grace. This was someone stepping back into a spotlight that had dimmed too long for his liking. It wasn't penance, it was positioning. The truth is, his return had nothing to do with setting the record straight and everything to do with rewriting the narrative. When he left, he was a cautionary tale, a symbol of what happens when ego outruns integrity. But now, suddenly, we're being asked to see him as a comeback story. Not because he's changed, but because his team found a way to make us believe he had. Because in today's world, image can be sculpted, no matter how broken the past is. And image is what he's after. Redemption asks, how can I make amends? Reputation asks, how can I be seen differently? And every move he's made points to the latter. The choreographed interviews, the conveniently timed philanthropic gestures, the renewed relationships with those who once distanced themselves, they all signal a shift not in heart but in strategy. He didn't spend this time rebuilding himself. He spent it rebranding himself. And why? Because reputation is currency. In the industries he operates in, whether it's entertainment, sports, politics, or business, being likable, being relevant, being talked about isn't optional, it's essential. When his reputation collapsed, so did his access. The deals, the invitations, the power, they all disappeared. His name became toxic, his face a reminder of scandal. So he stepped back, not to grow, but to wait. Wait until the public softened. Wait until the culture shifted. Wait until the right time to make an entrance that felt earned, even if it wasn't. Now he's back not because he's a better man, but because he's better at playing the game. He's studied the audience. He's watched others fall and rise again. He knows the formula. He knows people don't remember details, they remember feelings. If he can make them feel like he's changed, they'll forget whether he ever actually did. And so he gives them just enough vulnerability, just enough apology, just enough distance from his former self. Not too much, just enough to be believable. It's not honesty, it's optics. And here's what proves it most. He never addressed the core of what he did wrong. Not directly, not personally, not to the people who truly deserved it. The apologies were general, the statements vague. Because true accountability is risky. It means confronting uncomfortable truths. It means losing more before you gain anything. And he's not willing to do that. He doesn't want healing. He wants a clean slate. A reboot, not a reckoning. This wasn't a return fueled by growth. It was fueled by fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of irrelevance. Fear of being replaced by new faces, new voices, new stories. He came back because being gone meant losing control over how the world remembered him. And if he couldn't be celebrated, he'd settle for being forgiven. But even that forgiveness is something he's trying to earn not through action, but through aesthetics. Reputation is a fragile thing, but it can be mended with the right tools. A good PR firm, a cooperative media landscape, and an audience that loves a comeback. He knows this and he's using it, not to make things right, but to make things look right. There's a difference. And we must not confuse that difference. We must not accept the illusion in place of the truth. Because if we do, we reinforce the idea that redemption is something you can perform, not something you must live. We tell people that it's not about who you are now, but how well you can hide who you were. So let's be clear, this was never about making peace. It was about making noise. It was never about owning the past. It was about outrunning it, and it was never about redemption. It was about reclaiming something far less meaningful, but far more profitable, his reputation. The applause he seeks now is not for growth or healing. It's for survival, and that's not a comeback, that's a cover-up. While all eyes are on his return, while cameras flash and headlines scream about his comeback, something more important is being quietly buried. This return, this sudden reappearance after months or even years of silence, is being sold to us as a moment of triumph, of redemption, of growth. But it's not. It's something else entirely. It's a distraction, a cleverly timed, emotionally manipulative distraction from the real issues we should be paying attention to. And the worst part, it's working. It's not an accident that this return coincides with moments of real tension elsewhere. There are bigger problems unfolding right now: economic instability, political upheaval, social injustice, corruption in places most people have stopped looking. But instead of focusing on those urgent realities, we're all being encouraged, if not coerced, to focus on him, on his story, on his feelings, on his brand, new journey of change. Why? Because the people in power know exactly how to manipulate attention. They know that public outrage, if left unchecked, becomes dangerous. So what do? They give us something else to feel outraged about. Or better yet, something to cheer for. A comeback is always easier to digest than a scandal. A well-known face is always more clickable than a complex issue. The real issues haven't gone away. They've just been pushed into the background. While we're busy analyzing his tone in interviews and debating whether his apology seemed sincere, real injustices are continuing unchecked. The systems that failed us before are still failing us now. The promises that were made to fix things have been quietly swept aside. The investigations, the accountability, the hard questions, they've been stalled, because now all anyone can talk about is him. And it's not just the media that's guilty. We're all complicit in this cycle. We crave stories like his, stories of redemption, of transformation, of fall and rise. They give us something to believe in. They give us hope that even the worst can be forgiven, that everyone deserves another chance. But that hope can be weaponized, that belief can be turned into a smokescreen, and that's exactly what's happening. They know we'll engage more with a dramatic return than we will with a long, complicated policy issue. They know we'll click on his face before we'll read about corruption in an industry we don't understand. They know that if they can keep us watching this, we won't ask questions about that. It's not that his story is unimportant, but it's being used to replace stories that matter more. It's being used to pull our attention away from what actually needs it. Look at the timing. Look at what's happening just beneath the surface. Unpopular legislation being quietly passed, funding being slashed for critical services, whistleblowers being silenced or ignored. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are documented tactics used throughout history. When leaders or institutions feel threatened by rising awareness or public unrest, they find a distraction, preferably one that feels meaningful, preferably one that draws just enough controversy to split attention, but not so much that it sparks real revolt. And what better distraction than a familiar face with a tarnished past and a well-staged return? Even the conversation surrounding his comeback is engineered to divide. It becomes a debate. Does he deserve forgiveness? Should he be welcomed back? Is he really sorry? And in debating those questions, we spend less time asking others questions that cut deeper. Why is housing still unaffordable for so many? Why are public schools underfunded? Why does systemic inequality persist across every sector? Why do powerful people continue to act without consequence unless it serves someone else's agenda to hold them accountable? But these questions are harder, they're less entertaining. They don't come with a face we recognize or a neatly packaged story arc. So instead, we are encouraged to pour our emotions into someone else's personal drama, someone who may not even be affected by the things that affect us daily. We are distracted by the drama of one while the suffering of many goes unnoticed. This kind of distraction is dangerous, because over time it normalizes a culture of selective attention. It trains us to care only when a story has a familiar structure. It teaches us to tune out the dull, difficult, or depressing in favor of the exciting, the emotional, or the famous. And when we do that, we become easier to control. We stop demanding transparency. We stop holding people accountable. We stop thinking critically, and that's exactly the environment that allows injustice to thrive. This is not to say that stories of personal transformation are unimportant, but they must not come at the cost of collective awareness. They must not replace our focus on systemic issues that affect millions. His return may be newsworthy, but it is not the news, and it should never be allowed to drown out the voices that have been shouting for help, for change, for fairness, for far too long. If we truly want to build a better society, we must learn to see through these distractions. We must ask why this story is being pushed so hard and who benefits from us focusing on it. We must hold space for personal narratives, yes, but not at the expense of public truth. Because every time we allow a single story to consume the headlines, we risk losing sight of the stories that matter more, stories that don't fit neatly into a comeback arc, stories without a PR team, stories that won't trend on social media, but that deserve our full attention nonetheless. They're telling us we should be grateful he came back, that we should welcome him with open arms, celebrate his return, and acknowledge his courage for facing the world again. But let's take a step back and really think about it. Who does this return actually serve? Who benefits most from this moment being framed as powerful, emotional, and redemptive? It isn't us, it's him, because the truth is, he needs us far more than we need him. When someone disappears from the public eye after controversy or failure, they lose more than fame. They lose relevance. They lose the ability to control the narrative. They lose the audience they once took for granted. And in today's world, attention is power. It's not just about being liked, it's about being seen. Visibility translates into opportunity, into brand deals, into influence, into wealth. And for someone like him, someone whose entire identity has been built on being watched, being celebrated, being praised, disappearing is a kind of death. So he came back, not because we called for him, but because he couldn't stand being silent any longer. And here's the thing, we've moved on, the world has changed, new voices have emerged, new stories have taken center stage. While he was gone, people found new heroes, new leaders, new creators to believe in. Life didn't pause without him. It progressed. In many ways, it got better. The void he thought he left behind filled up faster than he imagined. And that scares him, because now he has to earn his place again, not reclaim it. He has to convince people who already learned to live without him that they still need him. And that's a harder battle than he anticipated. This return, then, isn't a gift to us. It's a plea to be seen again. To matter again, he needs our forgiveness not to heal, but to function. He needs our attention not to connect, but to survive. Because in his world, if you're not relevant, you're invisible. And if you're invisible, you're powerless. So he's doing everything he can to pull us back in. The emotional interviews, the tearful confessions, the public gestures of supposed growth. These aren't about us. They're about him trying to unlock the door to a room that no longer belongs to him. But here's what's different now, we've learned. We've grown more skeptical. We're not so easily swayed by polished words or perfectly timed apologies. We've seen how these cycles work. A fall from grace, a brief disappearance, and then a re-entry strategically designed to generate sympathy and regain status. And we're tired of it, because we've realized that we don't actually need these figures as much as we once thought. We don't need to keep giving our time, our attention, and our emotional investment to people who see us as stepping stones on their path back to power. He's betting that we'll forget, that we'll soften, that we'll miss him. But the truth is we didn't. Not really, because while he was gone, the issues that truly mattered didn't go anywhere. We kept fighting for justice, for equality, for accountability. We kept building communities, telling stories, amplifying new voices. And none of those efforts depended on him. He wasn't there for the hard work. He wasn't part of the progress. So why should he be part of the reward? And still, he's trying, because he needs us to validate him. He needs to feel welcomed, wanted, needed. Without that, his return is hollow, his platform shrinks, his influence fades, so he's positioning himself not just as someone who's changed, but as someone we should want back. As if his presence somehow adds value to our lives, as if he still has something we're missing. But let's be honest, we've been just fine without him. Maybe even better, the narrative they're selling us is one of mutual benefit. They want us to believe that we need this story, that it teaches us something about forgiveness, resilience, or the human spirit. But that's not what this is. This isn't about us learning to forgive. It's about him avoiding being forgotten, and that desperation isn't noble. It's not brave, it's self-serving. He wants us to believe that he's been on a journey, that he's done the work, that he's ready to contribute again. But the journey only matters if it leads to something greater than himself. If it results in real change, real service, real humility, and none of that is present here. What's here is a desire to reclaim a spotlight that's dimmed. A desire to be adored again, to be relevant again, to feel important again. But we don't owe him that. Just because he wants back in doesn't mean we're obligated to make room. It's important to understand the difference between someone who has truly changed and someone who simply misses the benefits that came with their former status. One is self-aware, quiet, and patient. The other is loud, polished, and timed to perfection. He's chosen the latter path, not because he wants to give, but because he needs to take from us our attention, our time, our forgiveness. But we have the power to say no. We have the power to look at what he's offering and ask, does this serve us, or does it only serve him? Because in the end, this isn't about whether he deserves another chance. It's about whether we gain anything from giving it. And if the answer is no, if all he brings is noise, drama, and another distraction, then we must be brave enough to walk away. To choose peace over spectacle, growth over nostalgia, progress over repetition. He came back because he needs us. But we must not forget we never asked him to, and we don't have to welcome him just because he knocked.